Okay, kids. Hi. Today we are going to do history lesson number 6. And the last time we were talking about Columbus, how he had finished, come back in success on his voyage, and how he really became pretty well known and respected all over. But some people who were jealous of his success, remember they said, "Oh, it's not so big of a deal." And do you remember what he did with the egg? How he broke the egg in order for it to stand up straight up. No one else thought about doing that, and he said, "Yeah, something is easy to do once somebody shows you how it's done." So that was really interesting to me. That's sort of where we ended last time. So we're going to pick up the story from there. And then we get to learn about how America was named, because we don't live in Columbus land or even Columbia. So we're going to figure out how America was named, okay? So this is going to be super interesting, I think. Now, we take off from there. So Portugal was now very jealous of Spain's success. And King Ferdinand of Spain, so let me show you. This is King Ferdinand of Spain, and he was very fearful because this was King John of Portugal. So this is, let me write that down. This one is King John of Portugal, and this is Ferdinand of Spain. Ferdinand, okay. So King Ferdinand of Spain was a little worried because King John of Portugal, he was getting pretty jealous of all the success that Spain was having. So King Ferdinand didn't want King John to just go and take all that new land and the new islands that Columbus had discovered. So he appealed to the Pope, and he said, "Pope, will you please help us out? I just don't want this guy coming and grabbing my land because he's really jealous of me right now." And so the Pope came up with a compromise, and the Pope kind of drew a line down the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And he said that anything west of the line is going to belong to Spain. Everything east of the line is going to belong to Portugal. So anything new that is discovered, if it's to the west, it's going to belong to Spain. If it's to the east, it's going to belong to Portugal. And this was sort of the line of demarcation that the Pope decided on. So if you look at a map, you will see that that this gave Spain all of the Americas with their islands, all of these little islands that Columbus had discovered, except for a little bit of Brazil. And that went to Portugal. And that's why in this little area of Brazil, they speak the language of Portuguese, where everyone else doesn't. These guys speak Spanish, these guys speak Portuguese. And that's why, because that's where this line came from. The Pope was solving their dispute between King John and Ferdinand, okay? But almost before this matter was settled, Columbus had set forth again on another voyage across the great ocean. It was now no longer called the Sea of Darkness because he had figured out there's no monsters or horrible things there. And this time, he had no trouble getting a company. So a lot of people wanted to go with him. Everyone was eager to go with him. And a lot of the people that wanted to go were the sons of great nobles. So this time, the passage was made without any doubt and fear, but they were joyful when they left. So if you look at this map, this red one is the first time Columbus went. That's his first voyage. The green one is his second one. See, it says 1493 to 1496. And he went around all these islands again. And he went on 4 voyages total. The orange one is the third, and then the blue one is last, okay? So Columbus, when he went back, we're on this green voyage right now. He went back and he's basically going to go check on that little colony that he had left behind. But when he cast anchor, probably around there somewhere, the night before, when he cast anchor one night before the fort, his heart sank. All was dark and silent on the shore. He was still hopeful, okay? So he ordered 2 cannons to be fired as a signal to the colonists. The cannon boomed through the still, warm darkness of the night, and slowly the echoes died away. But there was no answer, save the sighing of the sea and the scream of the startled birds. From the fort there came no sound or any sign of life, and with sad forebodings, the Spaniards waited for the dawn. So they waited in their ship because no one answered. Then it was seen in the morning that the fort was a ruin. It had been burned and sacked, and there was torn clothing and broken vessels were strewn around. But as the Spaniards wandered sadly among the ruins, they found no trace of their companions, save 11 graves with the grass growing above them. And at first, no natives would come near the white men, for they feared their anger. But at length, tempted by the offer of gifts and other friendly signs, they came. They told how the Spaniards had quarreled amongst themselves, and how the fort had been attacked by unfriendly Indians from another island, and how all the white men had been slain. That means they were all killed, every single one of them. And that's how thus ended the first white colony ever planted in Western lands. They think that this is what happened because this is what the natives told Columbus of what had happened. They were basically attacked by, first they were fighting amongst themselves, and then they were attacked. Okay, so all traces of it had vanished. And upon the spot where La Navidad stood, there's now a little fishing village called Petite Anse. Okay. Columbus founded other colonies, so he went back and he founded lots of other colonies, but they succeeded no better than the first one. In all, he made 4 voyages across the Atlantic. And in the third, he landed upon the coast of South America. So let's look at that one. The third one, let's see. I think it's this. Yep. Oh, no, maybe it's the green one. Sorry, I don't have the whole picture there because I want to see what the third and fourth one. So it must have been this green one. He did land on South America right here. So he landed upon the coast of South America near the mouth of the Orinoco. But Columbus did not know that at last he had discovered the great double continent of America. He thought that he had merely discovered another island. And so he named it, like even when he landed here, he named it La Isla Santa. Afterwards, he was so delighted at the beauty of the land that he thought he must have found the Garden of Eden. So he became certain that he had landed on the eastern corner of Asia. So he thinks he's further around the world than he actually is. He didn't know that there was this landmass in between. In 1506, Columbus died. So that was in the year 1506 that he died, okay? And it is sad to think that he, who by his great faith and great daring led the way across the Sea of Darkness and gave a new world to the old, he died in poverty and neglect. The men who had wept for joy at the news of his discovery shed no tear over his grave. He died unwept, unhonored, and unsung. Years passed before men recognized what a great man had dwelt among them. Years passed before any monument was raised to his memory. But indeed, he had scarce need of any, for, as has been well said, the New World is his monument. And every child of the New World must surely honor that monument and seek never to deface it. So do you get what they're saying there? Like, even right after he died, he never got a monument because people really didn't realize that he was that great. Until it was after he died that they discovered actually this is a whole new land. And then they said, well, he still doesn't have a monument. Maybe he doesn't need one. Maybe the New World is his monument. Okay, and that takes us actually to chapter 5 of this book. And chapter 5 goes over how America was named. And so we're going to keep going from there. The New World is his monument, and yet the New World does not bear the name of Columbus. Like I said before, we don't live in Columbus land, right? So in this chapter, I'm going to tell you how America was named. As soon as Columbus had shown the way across the Sea of Darkness, many were eager to follow in his footsteps. "There is not a man," he says himself, "down to the very tailors, who does not beg to be allowed to become a discoverer." So among the many who longed to sail the seas, there was a man named Amerigo Vespucci. Like Columbus, Amerigo Vespucci was an Italian, so that means he was born in Italy, just like Columbus was born in Italy. Okay, so he was born actually in Florence, Italy, and he lived there for 40 years. Amerigo Vespucci, I'm talking about now. And he lived quietly, and he sort of earned his living as a clerk in the great merchant house of Medici. But although he was diligent at business, his thoughts were not wholly taken up with it. Like, he worked there for a job, but he didn't really love it. In his spare time, what he really loved to do was to read books of geography. And he loved poring over maps and charts. So he just like stared at and studied maps. After a time, business took Amerigo to Spain. And, well, I'll go back. So business took Amerigo to Spain. So he went to Spain. He was born in Italy, and then he went to Spain. I'll write it like that. Okay? So he went to Spain, and he was there when Columbus returned from his famous first voyage. And they're pretty sure that it was likely that Vespucci saw Columbus pass through the streets of Barcelona on his day of triumph. So just when Amerigo and Columbus met, we don't know. So we don't know exactly when they met. But very soon, we find Amerigo in the service of the merchant who supplied Columbus with food and other necessities. So remember, Amerigo was a clerk, so he started working for the merchant, the guy who was supplying Columbus with food and other stuff for his second voyage. So it had been thought by some that Vespucci went with Columbus on this voyage, but it seems like this is not very likely. Historians don't think that that really happened. He probably didn't go with Columbus, but it was about this time that Vespucci went on his first voyage, which explored the coast of Venezuela or of Central America. So this was kind of his voyage, where Vespucci went. If you follow it around that way, that's where he went. Anyway, let's see, where was I? Okay, so Vespucci goes on his first voyage. It is very doubtful where he went, so we're not totally sure where exactly. Was it here? We don't know exactly. But we do know, before going on this voyage, he had already been in Spain about 4 years, and he wasn't having very much success working as a merchant. So he decided to give up trading and just go to the sea, and he wanted to live a sea life. So no voyages perhaps have been more written about and fought over than those of Amerigo Vespucci. Some will have it that he went only on 2 voyages. So some people think he went on 2 voyages and say he was a braggart, so he just loved to brag, and he was a vainglorious fool if he said he went more. Other people think that he went on 4 voyages and probably 6, and most people now agree, like historians agree, that probably he went on at least 4. And Amerigo Vespucci, the guy who gave his name to the great double continent of America, he was no swaggering pretender. They don't think that anymore, but they think he was an honest and upright man. So they do think that he was honest and upright. Okay, so in the first 2 voyages that he made, Vespucci sailed under the flag of Spain. So this is the flag of Spain right here. So under the first 2 voyages, that's where he got his money. In the second 2, he sailed in the service of the King of Portugal. So that's the Portugal flag. But after his 4th voyage, he returned again to Spain. There, he received a large salary. They gave him lots of money. And they gave him the rank of captain. Okay? And later he was made Pilot Major of Spain, and he held that title until his death. Okay? Yet in all the voyages Vespucci went on, whether under the flag of Portugal or of Spain, he was never the leader. He went as sort of as an astronomer. He was the pilot, but other men were the captains of the expedition. He got that title from Spain, but when he was going on his voyages, he wasn't the captain in charge of the ships. Other people were in charge. And we know a lot about his voyages because he wrote a lot of letters. And here's a picture of some of the letters that he wrote. So it is from Amerigo's letters alone that we gather the little we know about his voyages. For although he says in one of his letters that he has written a book called The Four Voyages, that book has never been found and perhaps was never published. One long letter, however, that he wrote to an old schoolfellow was so interesting that it was published and it was read by many people all over Europe. It was, says an old English writer, abroad in every man's hands. That means every man's hands had a copy of this letter. So isn't that interesting? He just wrote a letter to one of his friends that he knew from school, and it was so interesting that they published it, and like everybody read that letter. It went viral. Amerigo's voyages led him chiefly to Central and South America. So he went kind of lower than Columbus did, and he became convinced that South America was a continent. He was like, I don't think this is an island. I think this might be a continent. So soon, what with the voyages of Vespucci and the voyages of other great men, it became at last quite certain that there was a vast continent beyond the Atlantic Ocean. So map makers, therefore, began to draw a huge island. So this is what they thought it looked like, kind of like this. They thought America was just like a humongous island. They didn't have like North America and South America figured out, but they thought it was like this huge place like this. And that's how map makers at the time drew it. So it was a huge island large enough to form in itself a continent south of the equator. They called it the New World, or the Land of the Holy Cross. Okay, so that's some of the names they gave it. So New World or Land of the Holy Cross. But the northern continent was still represented on the maps by a few small islands, or as a part of Asia because of Columbus's discoveries. So years passed. Daring sailors still sailed the stormy seas in search of new lands, and learned men read the tales of their adventures and wrote new books of geography. Then one day, a professor who taught geography at the monastery of Saint-Dié in Alsace published a little book on geography, and in it he talked about Europe, Asia, Africa, and the three parts of the world that were known to the ancient people. And then he spoke of the fourth part, which had been discovered by Amerigo Vespucci, he said, by which he meant what we now call South America. So he was talking about South America, and he gave it the name for the first time. He gave it the name America. And he says, and, continues this professor, I do not see what is rightly to hinder us calling this part Amerigi, or America. That is the land of Americas after its discoverer Americus. So he was the first person to give the New World this name of America, and he was mostly talking about South America. This is the first time the word America was ever used, and little did this old German professor, writing in his quiet college, think that he was christening the great double continent of the New World. So he didn't think he was naming it. He just kind of called it that. And as little did Amerigo think in writing his letter to his old schoolfellow, he was to be looked upon as the discoverer of the New World. So he didn't really discover it. He just wrote a very interesting letter to his friend from school about it. At first, the new name came slowly into use, and it appears for the first time on a map. Made about 1514, the name America appears on a map. So that's interesting. In this map, America is shown as a great island continent, lying chiefly south of the equator. All the voyages which Columbus had made had been north of the equator, so no man yet connected the land south of the equator with him, and it was at first only to the Southland that the name America was given. 30 years and more went by. Many voyages were made, and many voyages were made, and it became known for certain that Columbus had not reached the shores of India by sailing west, and that a great continent barred the way north as well as south of the equator. Then a famous mapmaker gave the name of America to both continents. So finally, they made this map, and they give it this name, America, and they're talking about the south and the north. And that was just done by a map maker, okay? But many Spaniards were jealous for the fame of Columbus, and they thought that the northern continent, so they were not jealous of Columbus. They wanted the fame. They wanted Columbus to be famous. They thought the north part should be called Colonia. Here, let me write that down. They thought the north part should be called either Colonia. That would be a weird name. We could live in the country of Colonia right now. Or Columbiana. Columbiana. Would you like to live in Columbiana? And then one, anxious that the part of the discovery taken by Ferdinand and Isabel should not be forgotten, they even tried to make people call it, watch this, we could live in this country, Isabelica. What if we lived in Isabelica? We could live in that country if that guy had his way, huh? But all such efforts were in vain. America sounded well, people liked it, and soon everyone used it. So that's how it just kind of stuck, because everyone sort of liked it and liked the way it sounded. But Amerigo Vespucci, who's shown right here, he actually had nothing to do with the choice. And yet, because others gave his name to the New World, many hard things have been said about him. He's been called in scorn a landlubber, a beef and biscuit contractor, and other bad names. Even one of the greatest American writers has poured scorn on him. Strange, he says, that broad America must wear the name of a thief, Amerigo Vespucci, the pickle dealer of Seville, whose highest naval rank was a boatswain's mate in an expedition that never sailed, managed in this lying world to supplant Columbus and baptize half the earth with his own dishonest name. But it was actually the people of his day, and not Vespucci, who brought the new name into use. Vespucci himself had never had any intention of being a thief or of robbing Columbus of his glory. He and Columbus had always been friends. And little more than a year before he died, Columbus wrote a letter to his son Diego, which Vespucci delivered. In this letter, Columbus says, Amerigo Vespucci, the bearer of this letter, has always been wishful to please me. He is a very honest man. He is very anxious to do something for me, if it is in his power. So it was really only accident which gave the name of America to the New World, and perhaps the ingratitude of the great leader's own generation. Okay? Later generations, however, have not been so unmindful of Columbus and his deeds. Americans have not allowed Columbus's name to be wholly forgotten. For example, there's the District of Columbia. So you know how our capital of our country is Washington, D.C.? Did you ever wonder what the D.C. stands for? It stands for District, sorry for my handwriting, I'm trying to write fast, of Columbia, and that is named after Columbus. So our capital is named after Columbus in the District of Columbia. In Canada, too, there is the great province of British Columbia, and in South America, the United States, there's the United States of Colombia. Besides many towns, all named in honor of the great discoverer. So that's where we're going to end this time. We kind of learned how America got its name from Amerigo Vespucci. Columbus didn't hate him. In fact, he said very nice things about him in that letter that he wrote a year before his death. So he doesn't seem to be upset with that. And we still have a lot of places that honor Christopher Columbus. Okay, so that's pretty much the end of that chapter, and we'll leave it at that. Okay, hope you enjoyed this history lesson. Bye.